Our text for today will be coming from John chapter 18, verses 28 through 38. We will be discussing Jesus's first appearance before Pilate. There are two appearances in the gospel account. At the end of our appearance here, we're going to notice that it's actually not, I don't think it's mentioned in John. It's mentioned in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. My memory's correct, that Jesus appears before Pilate the first time. Pilate finds out that Jesus is from Galilee, so he sends him back over to Herod. Is Herod Agrippa? I forget now. Doesn't matter. Huh? Antipas. There we go. So he sends him over there for judgment. And then he makes the return trip back to Pilate after his appearance before Herod. So this is the first appearance that Jesus has before Pilate. That's what we're going to focus on today. I think in about 2 weeks, if my memory's on the schedule, is when we'll have the second appearance before Herod. As I said, this is found in all four of the gospel accounts. If you're taking notes, it's Matthew 27, verse 11, Mark 15, verse 1, Luke 23, verse 1, and John 18, 28 is where this account occurs in each of the gospel narratives. Now, we will focus entirely on John 18 today. So if you have a Bible, that's where you'll want to be. John 18, verse 28 through 38 is where we're going to spend the majority of our time today. Really, my goal for today is for us to cover the 10 verses that are in question. And as we cover those 10 verses, really just to ask a series of questions about the comments that are being made. I want us to be a little more discussion focused. So hopefully you can wake up, maybe you've had your morning coffee, your morning bacon and eggs, and we can be a little more discussion oriented today. Those of you online, the same thing applies. Feel free to unmute yourself, and in unmuting of yourself, just go ahead and feel free to make your comment. I think everyone in the crowd will hear you here. John chapter 18, verse 28. Actually, before we begin, let's start with a word of prayer. Would someone be willing to lead us in a prayer this morning? Either online or in person. Roger, would you lead? Oh, Chris motion, so go for it, Chris.
Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for your son. Father, we thank you we can gather here together as fellow Christians. Father, we thank you for this time where we can study your word and get into the life of what's going on with Christ and Pilate, get into the mind so and understand the inner workings of what's going on in this situation. Father, thank you for Josh and his family. Thank you for Josh's preparation to study this morning. And let us be participants in the study. Give us through the rest of this service and something we pray.
Amen. Thank you very much, Chris. So as we're starting off in John chapter 18, verse 28, you're going to notice that Jesus is in the custody of the Jewish leaders. Primarily, we're going to focus on, probably call them the Sanhedrin, to be a little more focused. And it says they took Jesus from Caiaphas. If you do not know the name Caiaphas, Caiaphas is the acting high priest at the time. And so they're taking him from his judgeship, if you will, and as his position, he should have been a fair and balanced judge. He should have been looking at the case and been able to make a judgment based upon what the accusations towards Jesus was. They remove Jesus from Caiaphas and they take him to where or to whom? Real tough question. To who? Pilate. Perfect answer. That's why I said it's a real tough question. I try to ask the real tough ones early in the morning. Get you really going here. They take him to Pilate. They say that takes him here to the Roman governor, which is Pilate, which is interesting at this point. Pilate normally would have been in Caesarea. He would not have been in Jerusalem. However, it was not uncommon for the Roman governors to come to Jerusalem on important holidays. Why do you think the Roman governor would bring himself and maybe a small to medium-sized contingency of the army with him to Jerusalem on an important holiday?
Patriotic sentiment would run high, especially at Passover.
You know, anytime you have a good old-fashioned group of people that are all together for the same united purpose, it tends to become a little bit of a ruckus, or it can be. It could even then become from a ruckus to a riot, and particularly when you're dealing with people who have patriotic priority to the nation of Israel. And so in their situation, Pilate's not a dummy. People before him have done it, and he himself has done it several times, where he will go to Jerusalem on holidays, not his personal holiday, but on Jewish holidays, take a small army of people with him, and he is prepared to squash any form of rebellion or any form of problem. As we're beginning to get into Pilate, just for a quick moment, I'm going to ask a question. Is Pilate A, good guy, or B, a bad guy?
I think he's a good guy.
You think he's a good guy? Okay. I see some, two people.
I think he wants to straddle the middle of the fence.
Ooh, straddle the middle of the fence. Okay. This is all, all personal idea, perspective, conjecture. Anyone think he's a bad guy?
Well, he had contempt for the Jews.
Luke chapter 13, if I remember 13, I think it's Luke 13. There's actually a reference there where I forget what had happened.
He mixed the blood of the Galileans with theirs.
Yeah, there it was. So we know that he wasn't really the most popular guy for the Jews. By the way, Pilate, after the next Roman emperor comes in, he is recalled back to Rome because he has not built a really good reputation among the people he's supposed to be over. He's kind of seen as more of an overlord. We do see some maybe redeeming moments in our text today. Some moments where you say, what could really be going on in Pilate's mind? Could there be good? Could he be straddling the fence? But it says that this is verse 28, by now it is early morning. That would not have been a problem for Pilate. A typical Roman would have actually probably started working at, let's say, 3-ish in the morning, 4-ish in the morning. They started work early, and with the goal of finishing their day's job or tasks by 11 or 12. So for a Roman governor, the early morning would not have been a problem. It would have, however, been a problem for the Jews, as they have been trying Jesus. They would have been having what we would call a capital murder trial, or capital, not murder, but a capital execution trial going on in the middle of the night. How smart is that?
It wasn't supposed to happen.
It wasn't supposed to happen.
It was actually illegal.
It was illegal. So let's just, not going into what the legalities of it. By the way, that it was illegal to have an executionary trial over the nighttime. It was supposed to have been done A, in the daytime, and then B, once there was a conviction to execute, you were still supposed to have waited 1 day before you actually executed. So this whole timeline is very rushed to be proper.
And there may even be a question of whether they should have even had a trial during the time of Passover.
Passover is a major holiday. And this is also the feast of unleavened bread. So we have a very, convoluted time period of where they're trying to rush an execution for Jesus. All of those things show, at least I think, that really And we'll get to that in a minute. I don't want to jump too far ahead. It's early morning, and then to avoid, actually, this is the perfect one. To avoid ceremonial uncleanliness, the Jews do not enter into the Roman palace, to Pilate's offices.
Why would that make them unclean?
Great question. So the best that I can find would state that entering into a Gentile's home, they felt made someone unclean because of leaven, because of any of the impurities that a Gentile would have in their home. There's some writing that comes, I think it's actually after this time period, but it gives us the mindset, and the phrasing was that they put aborted fetuses down the drains of Gentile homes. So, which then brings the question is, if one, it's kind of just a matter of a Jewish perspective of a Gentile person. Coming in contact with leaven would make someone unclean till nighttime. So if we're talking Passover and we're avoiding the day of Passover or the day of Feast of Unleavened Bread where there's a midday meal, they would have been clean by nightfall. So they could have taken up a nighttime meal. That's where we kind of come into where does this actually fit date-wise and time-wise. But I think the biggest part is the way they view Gentiles. They view Gentiles and the homes that Gentiles lived in as just places of death. If a Jew came in contact with a dead body, and that's where the aborted fetuses come in, if they came in with a contact with a dead body, they were unclean for 7 days. And so then they could not partake of the Passover. Like I said, that kind of gives us the insight to how they actually viewed a Gentile. Good question, though. Any other questions so far?
But yet, with the high priesthood being controlled by the Romans at this point, it's kind of flaky logic.
Well, and let's move a little forward, because I'm about flaky logic. Here they are, they're not wanting to enter a Gentile home because of ritual or ceremonial uncleanliness. But what have they just done?
Broken their own laws.
They've broken their own laws. They've rushed an execution. They've got false witnesses, which, by the way, that had been part of the high priest's role, would have been to find false witnesses, find true witnesses, find measurements and balances and all this other stuff, and to weigh a just and true verdict.
Sounds like promise.
Oh, the world we live in today. Is it always fair and is it always balanced? But I want to bring this thought more to maybe us on a personal level. They were so focused on ritual obedience that they were really forgetting the greater story of the law. Finding and doing right, doing good, treating your neighbors with love and respect and care. And instead, it was more power play. Let's get Jesus out of the picture so that we can control and we can keep on doing what we've got going. But all the time we've got to do that while we're trying to maintain our image, our ceremonial cleanliness. The question I would have for us as an application would be, do we ever fall guilty of that? You don't have to answer yes or no, but do we ever strive to appear clean and right on the outside, but yet maybe behind closed doors we're pushing something else? Maybe behind closed doors we're a little different of a person. So, verse 29, Pilate comes out to him. Would not have been uncommon. Pilate would have, like I said, it would have been a working day for Pilate. He'd have been among his chores. He also would have been somewhat understanding to the Jews, and for him to step out and to meet them, that wouldn't have been out of the question. But notice what Pilate says. What charges are you bringing against this man? We know the end story. But what charge could they throw against Jesus? Is there anything that they could accuse him of where he would be found guilty of? Claim to be Son of God? Well, yeah, guilty, but he is. And that's where some of this really comes from on the Jewish side. The Jews are looking at this as a crime of blasphemy, but more so they're just wanting a way to remove Jesus. He's become too popular. You'll notice in verse 30, their comment to Pilate is more, I don't know if you would say it's irony or if it's not irony. It's kind of belittling to Pilate, I would say. Their comment, if he wasn't a criminal, would we have handed him over to you? It's kind of like, come on, Pilate. We wouldn't be wasting your time if this guy wasn't really a threat. And then they come up with the actual charges, or Pilate kind of kicks back. The actual charges come up next. Pilate says, take him yourself and judge him by your own laws. Verse 31. Why didn't they just judge him with the Sanhedrin and take him out and stone him? Rome was crafty, and one of the things that they did was they said the only entity that had the power for capital punishment was Rome. Now, there was a little exclusion in the temple. If a Gentile was to have made it into, let's say, one of the holier places, they, on the temple grounds, could execute. And we also know that if you go over to Stephen's stoning in Acts, 9 probably, you have the stoning of Stephen. That's more a mob than it is a trial. The stoning of Stephen's more a group of people that rise up. And Rome, they didn't care. I mean, unless if it was causing a problem for them, they weren't going to be concerned about who was actually doing what. They wanted Jesus to die by a cross. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 23 would tell us that cursed is a man who hangs on a tree, cursed by God. The Jews wanted Jesus to die on a cross. They wanted everyone to see him on a tree so that people would know that he was cursed by God. They could have stoned him. They could have made him disappear. They could have taken him out and buried him afterwards, and no one would have, there'd been a crowd of people who would have said, well, where'd he go? But they wanted public humiliation, and they didn't have that power. This is verse 31, continuing. We have no right to object. This all took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death that he was going to die. I think that's in John chapter 8, if my memory is correct, on where, if I wrote the right reference down here, but Jesus, knowing that he was going to die by crucifixion, prophesied about that. The charges that they end up bringing to Pilate about Jesus are basically that Jesus is an insurrectionist. He's claiming to be a king, and in claiming to be a king, he's wanting to overthrow Rome. He's wanting to kick Rome out. That's really the charge that they end up trying to bring against Jesus. And Pilate comes in to question Jesus now. This is about verse 33 of our text. He comes in and he's questioning Jesus. And by the way, we're going to jump just real quickly to the very last. At the very end, Pilate comes out and he basically says, Jesus is innocent. But I have a custom that I'm going to release someone to you at this time of year. I've got Jesus and I've got Barabbas. Who do you want? And who does the crowd yell for? Barabbas. That's okay. They yell for Barabbas. They want him free. Yeah, they wanted Barabbas free. They want Jesus to stay where he's at. Barabbas probably was the one that was headed for crucifixion that day. If he wasn't headed for crucifixion, he was going to be headed for something, but they probably would have crucified him.
There are some versions of the Bible that have Barabbas, a first name of Jesus.
Yes. I don't know where I read that at, but
It's used in the New Revised Standard Version.
is it? Okay. And so we find it interesting, though, that Pilate knows, and by the way, Barabbas has been a troublemaker for years. Pilate knows what a real troublemaker's like. He knows that Jesus is not a real troublemaker. I mean, y'all know any troublemakers in your life? You can probably think of a personality that fits what a typical troublemaker is. Pilate's no dummy. He deals with these people all the time. He knows what a troublemaker looks like, and he knows that Jesus isn't that. So the whole Barabbas scene is really a way that Pilate's trying to get out of what the Jews are wanting him to do. But Pilate is weak. He doesn't have his own ability to stand on a conviction. So he ends up sending Jesus on for crucifixion later, but that's a count that gets us further along. Pilate goes back inside, this is verse 33, summons Jesus, and he asks Jesus this question: "Are you the king of the Jews?" Why does he ask that?
That's what he's being accused of.
It's what he's being accused of. And what's the threat then? Or why is that of concern to Pilate?
It could be a threat to Rome, a king that would, over Jerusalem or over the Jews, could be a threat to Rome.
So this is a threat. And so Pilate asking a very simple question. If Jesus had said, "Why, yes, I am," what would have happened?
That would have forced Pilate's hand. He would have had to take the more visible part right then.
Pilate wouldn't have had another choice. You have a guy who's now directly claiming to be a king besides Caesar. Got to do something about that. Jesus' answers, though, are pretty, in some ways, they're absolutely beautiful. 34, is this your own idea? Or have others talked to you about me? What do you think Jesus is saying there?
He wants to know, is this his own idea or is he just listening to the people? But Jesus always asks people questions when they come to talk to him, never gives them the answers they're looking for. He always gives them another thought and another question.
I read that somewhere, Laura. Thank you for bringing that. I read that in a book that it was like Jesus only made, I'm going to make up a number because I can't remember the statistic. It was like 5 statements where he actually answered a question.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time it was he answered a question with a question. Pilate here asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He says, "Yes." Well, there's an instant conviction. You say no, and then you're denying, or Jesus is denying who he is. But Jesus's response is almost prying. Pilate, what do you believe?
You know, it sort of gets back to what you were talking about at first, where the Sanhedrin is basically an organized lynch party. They're trying to pass the blame off, take the blame off themselves and put it on Rome. And kind of hang Pilate with it. Well, Jesus asked Pilate a direct question. You know, is this your idea or theirs? And he's put it to Pilate. And Pilate basically truthfully answers, you know, correctly. He's coming from his standpoint, but and at first he's trying to shift the blame back to them, put it in their court. So you got that going on back and forth. So I think Christ when he asked Pilate that, it's you, it's not they, it's you. Pussy would say,
You know, for all of the wrong that exists in Pilate, there's one thing we can credit him with in this account, is that he was at least just, he was fair to the evidence. What I mean by that is, should Jesus have died? Not legally. He knew Jesus was innocent. In this whole time, his whole intent is to try to find a way to get Jesus out while appeasing the Jews, because he knows we're dealing with an innocent man. And then there's the spectacle where he calls the wash basin of water and he washes his hands and he says, do as you want. I'm done with this. I wash my hands of this. For all of the wrongs that Pilate has, there are some redeeming qualities. And in this case, he knows Jesus is innocent. He doesn't want to charge him. Greg?
In the last part of the trial, Jesus was put under oath, if you will, by the high priest. And he chose to answer the question that he was the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One. Which then, when they take him to Pilate, they twist that to actually say he is the King of the Jews, which he didn't quite say.
Yeah.
He just said he was the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed. When Pilate gets that, he's, like you guys have already pointed out, he's got to deal with it as a insurrectionist, someone that's going to cause trouble. But Jesus chose what he was going to be tried for as the King of the Jews, as the Messiah. So he's in control of this, even though it doesn't look like it.
It is amazing to see how Jesus moves, and thank you for bringing that up. It's almost like chess pieces, if you will. How Jesus is moving all of these people and shifting their thoughts. He is, I almost made this comment a moment ago. In some ways, Jesus' conversation here reminds me of Paul when it comes to Paul and his ability to argue. Jesus is masterfully doing this. Now, we're at verse 34 currently, and Jesus is prying into Pilate. You know, is this the charge that is legitimately from you as the Roman governor, or is this the charge that's coming from someone else? And then Pilate's comment, am I a Jew? I want you to hear that a little more, maybe sarcastically, or a little more like, do I look like I'm a Jew to you? Your own people, your chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you've done? Pilate still doesn't fully grasp what's going on. I believe there was some collusion before all of this. I firmly believe that the high priest had probably been talking to Pilate at some point prior to all of this. But what is it that you have done? And Jesus says, and you'll notice that in this next two statements of Jesus, the first one in 36, Jesus answers with a negative beginning. My kingdom is not of this world. If you go to 37, Jesus, in the continuing idea of kingship, answers on the positive. You say that I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born was basically, in fact, I am. We'll come to that in just a moment. But you'll notice, first off, Jesus answers in the negative, really to kind of put Pilate back onto, I'm going to say back on his heels. Pilate's coming at him thinking, well, I'm now dealing with an insurrectionist. Jesus answers the question. My kingdom's not of this world. I'm not a threat to Rome. If I were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders, but now my kingdom is from another place. The kingdom that I'm building is not a kingdom against Rome per se. So this should have instantly thrown Pilate back a little bit. Jesus answering this way would have said, well, if you're not a king, then what really are you? So Pilate comes back again. This is 37. So you're a king then? And this is more accusing, not questioning. This is more accusing. And Jesus says, you say that I'm a king. I'm going to give you probably a better way to understand that. If you want to write this down, you can. Jesus's comment is almost like, well, king's a good word for it. King's the best word you can come up with. It's not necessarily like, Jesus is not being sarcastic. That's the best word you can come up with because that's the best you can say. How would you describe Jesus to a person who has no understanding or very little of a Messiah, a ruler who lives in heaven? Well, you say that I'm a king. That's the best word you've got for it. In fact, the reason I was born, I came into the world, testified to the truth. Everyone on the side of the truth listens to me.
Something else that would ring a bell with Pilate, being Roman governor and familiar with soldiers. Christ said, if your leader is arrested, is an insurrection, his people would have came to defend him. And that didn't happen. So that, Pilate, I think Pilate's smart enough to see that real quick. That's what led that questioning in his mind.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great point, Chris. Because if Jesus really was a king, there would be a war going on right now. But there's not. Christ's kingdom was not an earthly kingdom. It was a spiritual kingdom. We have the benefit today of knowing that, I guess, from our own current perspective. But Jesus mentions here that the reason he came was for truth. How does truth play into all of this?
The bigger picture is God working in this whole scenario up to this point and later on. We got a culmination point coming here. This is just leading up to it. Beside all the human things we see going on in the world.
This is real. We're moving to a powerful moment of the cross. As we think about truth in this moment, though, has there been any truth from the Jews in all of this? None. Not a single one of them has been truthful. Matter of fact, if we said let's even look at Jesus' disciples for a moment, how much truth's been going on there? Oh, by the way, Peter's denied Jesus. Everyone else is scattered. John might be the only disciple that is somewhat within earshot of any of this stuff. There is no truth. And sadly, probably the most truthful individual in this account or in our text today, besides Jesus, is Pilate. Because he steps, we know the end of this was Pilate steps out and he says, I don't see anything wrong with man. I can't hold him. I can't accuse him of this. Take him over to Herod. Pilate answers in a very ominous, I think it's ominous to me, verse 38. What is truth? Now, my translation says that he retorts it with this idea. So the idea would be that it's more of a scoff than it is a legitimate question to who Pilate, a legitimate concern for Pilate. But that's a very troubling question, is it not? What is truth? It's troubling to me because at this moment, the Jews have abandoned all sacredness of truth. Even in their laws, they've abandoned their laws. They had the essence of truth in their midst, and they charged it guilty of wrong in some way, because it spoke against them. This now truth in human form stands before Pilate, and he makes the comment that if the person who knows truth will know me. And Pilate, as much as we may want to give him a lot of credit, I think in some ways there are some redeeming qualities. Truth was not within him. I find no basis of charge against him. That's verse 38.
That's a troubling question for us today. What is truth? I can have my truth, you can have your truth. There's no absolute.
Well, that's where I was wanting us to go for just a minute, Greg, so I'm glad you took us there. Because it's still a troubling question. When we live in a world that says, well, everyone has, as you said, their own versions of truth, what happens?
Truth is meaningless. If everyone has their own truth, then you can't dispute my truth, I can't dispute your truth. You can't nail it down.
It really is the same story that happens here. The Pharisees or the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin builds their idea of truth. Pilate has his idea of truth. And we find that all of the people involved have their own stories of truth that are all still circling around what really is true. And in this case, we know the future is that a number of hours later, truth is crucified. In our world today, if we tried to narrow down and hammer down what truth is, what would happen?
Well, I'm telling you that if I've got a truth and you've got a truth, and it becomes an argument, and we just fight over it.
And we're not really going to move anyone any direction, because yet again, I can't say you're wrong, because truth is relative. The thing that we would have to, I think, build an agreement upon is that there's got to be some form of concrete, balanced truth, something that's outside of us. That's where I'm going to say religion for a broad term, but religion, Christianity in our case, finds incredible value, is it puts all people to a central idea of truth. The belief in a singular God and the reality of that God puts us all to a singular truth. We have a written account of truth within our hands, as far as a book goes, as far as a Bible goes, that is an account of truth that's walked this earth.
There's another thing, when you make that statement. If I read the Bible, everybody else reads the Bible, and most often, in a lot of cases, it's going to say one thing to you and say something different to me. So then again, where do we stand? I mean, that's what I've said all along, and that's the reason I don't try to teach. A teacher is supposed to be able to teach me something that is different than what I believe, or convince me that what I believe is the right one. How often can you do that?
It all depends. Because here would be the other side in the quest of truth. How intelligent are the people that we're talking about? And not intelligence like IQ level, but how much time have people spent really working and studying and developing within themselves a knowledge? I'm going to point to Angela because she's here. She's our honored guest today. Angela has a unique specialty in the education. That would mean that I don't have the same qualifications to speak to. But there are probably people in your field that are qualified that when you speak can have some form of either agreement or disagreement. I think the real struggle we have in Christianity and our churches is, I'm going to go back to ignorance. I think we're ignorant. And if we were somewhat intelligent or spent time in study, we might find some more knowledge. Go for it, Glenda.
In my hearing, there's no absolute truth.
I just
No.
hope you're not doing that, because that is not the case at all.
Well, good.
There is no confusion in truth. It is what it is. If you're not of him, then you may not understand it. But there is, we lost our identity. Jesus is here telling us, I just came to tell the truth. I am, yeah, as you said, I am king. There is no doubt about that. The truth is all of you, Jews, Romans, like everybody, lost their identity. You belong to my daddy, you belong to my father, you're my brother, you're my sister, and I came to tell you that. That's the simple truth. All the other things that you try to confuse into this situation, Satan could not get, the fallen man brought that into it. It's not God. That is not the analysis, the analyzing things, and being able to talk ourselves out of the truth. That's from Satan. It's not from God. The truth is the truth. Period. It cannot be changed. He came here to redeem us, to bring us back, to give us our identity back. He had to die because of sin. He set us free from all that, and he gave us our identity back, and that's all it's saying here. I think Pilate, this is a cool story, but Pilate was not ignorant to all this going on. Nobody that high up in government is blind to what's going on. He's been seeing and hearing what Jesus has been doing all along. I personally think he's got a lot of fear in him right here. Now, this man is there's something about him. I don't know what it is. And Jesus is trying to tell him, what you say. And I'm not here for your position. I'm not here to take over Rome. I'm here to bring everybody back into the identity, into Christ, into God, where we belong. And it's not confusing. There's nothing hard about it. We plant seeds. We don't try and talk people into Christ. We don't try and talk into things. That's where we grew up. That's where we came from. I think we've been taught that for a long time. That's not what Jesus did. It's the goodness of God. It's not the reprimand. It's the goodness of God that brings people back to Christ. It's not discipline. It's not telling them to belong. It's not convincing them how they need to be. It's showing them the goodness of Christ. That brings souls back. That's very plain in these words. In this book.
Well, look at verse 38. 38, Jesus' comment there is basically the people who are going to hear truth are going to hear truth because I'm going to speak that way.
Well, it's very scary, and I put a warning out right now that when we question truth, that's from Satan. We are confused. We need to dig back into the word because there's no question about it. There's nothing to bring that up. It's unquestionable. It's not something that we back and forth. Well, there's not truth. Well, yes, there is. And he came to share it with us.
But we live in a world that says, I can have my truth, Josh can have his truth, Steve can have his truth, Chris can have his truth. And you live by your truth, I'll live by my truth, and that's where we are. And I think that leads to some of the other issues that we face in our world today. I can choose whether I want to be a man or a woman. It's my truth. He's going to argue with me about it.
I don't think we're supposed to argue.
Were you going to
No,
ask
but the reality
Did you get your
is, yes,
Well, I think that's what we got to question is, are we supposed to call people out for that? Or are we supposed to show them, are we supposed to just let Christ shine through us? And it's a different perspective on how we treat them. We've been taught that
to go at it out straight on. Jesus never did that. I mean, if it was something that needed to be called out with, that was usually the cost of somebody's soul, not.
And this.
I'm gonna interrupt for just a second because Angela's had her hand up a time or two now. I'll give that to her, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up because we are out of time on this part, but.
Well, I mean, I think the discussion that we've had is relevant in the sense that, especially from a worldly perspective that we live in, but I wanted to go back to the verse because I'm wondering, I don't have a definitive answer, but in John 14, Jesus says, I am the truth and the way and the life. And so when I read this, I'm thinking that when he's talking about truth here, it's saying the truth about me and the salvation that I'm bringing is the focus here. That he's pointing to, and that's, to me, that's kind of where the emphasis is in this section.
Yeah.
Well, and that brings us kind of, I think, full circle to where y'all both were at. I think that's where Glenda's at. My comment and my statement was truth is standing right in front of Pilate. And here in a few hours, truth is crucified. I am the way, the truth, and the life. So I think that that's where we are saying is that as a Christian, we have definitive truth. I know who truth is, and I can find it. I think the problem goes back to our own ignorance of who Jesus is. I think that's where we struggle.
You know, you do get understanding. Yes, you're looking to kill us. What are we growing up thinking what you don't know won't hurt you? It's exactly opposite. What we don't know is killing us. And that's what we're trying to tell us.
The verse,
I'm going to say what Andy said, it's not what Chris's truth is, Luther's truth is, or anybody else's truth is, who truth was. And it's as simple as the thief on the cross. He knew who truth was.
Jesus is the truth, and his truth was, I came to save, not to condemn.
But his truth is exclusive.
it is. And the world doesn't like that. We're going to